The office party was in full swing, with everyone laughing and enjoying the night. The soft music played in the background, glasses clinked, and conversations buzzed through the air. Mark, the young event planner, had worked hard all week to make this party a success. It was supposed to be a fun break for the employees after a long month of deadlines and meetings. The bright lights, delicious food, and laughter were meant to relax everyone. But as Mark stood in the corner, holding a drink and surveying the crowd, he felt a strange sense of discomfort. The night wasn't going the way he had hoped. He noticed the same few people laughing in the corner, while others sat off to the side, not engaging. It seemed like no one was really making an effort to mix with the others. The party was a little quieter than Mark expected. He had hoped that everyone would get along, but instead, there was an awkward distance between the different teams in the office. Mark sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. This was his job to make everyone feel comfortable, and right now, it didn't feel like he was succeeding. As he moved through the room, checking on the food and drinks, Mark passed by the windows of the office building. He glanced outside and saw a woman sitting on the cold concrete bench just outside the entrance, holding a sign. Her clothes were old, and she looked tired and worn. Her face was hidden beneath a hood, but Mark could see that she looked like someone who had been struggling for a long time. For a moment, Mark hesitated. He had seen her earlier that day on his way into the office. He had passed her without a second thought. But now, seeing her again, something tugged at his heart. He thought about how comfortable everyone inside the party seemed, laughing, eating, and having a good time. He thought about how easy it was to forget that there were people out there struggling, people who didn't have the luxury of such comfort. A voice inside Mark told him to go back inside and just forget about it. It was his job to make sure the party went well, not to worry about people outside. But another voice, softer and more persistent, urged him to do something kind. He looked at his watch. The party was halfway through, and people were starting to settle in. Maybe, just maybe, he could do something small to help brighten someone's day. Mark walked outside, his footsteps light against the concrete. The woman looked up at him as he approached, her tired eyes meeting his. She didn't ask for anything. She simply sat there, a quiet figure in the cold night. He cleared his throat, unsure of what to say. "Hey," he said softly. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" The woman blinked, her face still hidden under the hood. She didn't respond right away, just looked at him with a tired expression. After a long pause, she said, "I'm fine. Just sitting here." Mark hesitated. He wasn't sure what to do next. He could see that she wasn't in any immediate danger, but it was clear that she was going through something difficult. The warmth of the office party seemed so far away now, and the sounds of laughter and celebration almost felt out of place in this moment. He thought about the people inside, how they were enjoying their evening, and how easy it was for them to forget the people who were struggling outside. Then, an idea popped into Mark's head. It was a strange thought, but it seemed like the right thing to do. "You know, we're having a party inside," he said, looking at her carefully. "I'm sure it's not much, but if you'd like, you can join us. There's food, music, drinks. It's just a small office thing, but I'm sure you'd be welcome." The woman's eyes widened in surprise, and she looked up at him more carefully. "You want me to come inside?" she asked slowly, almost as if she didn't believe what she had just heard. Mark nodded. "Yeah, I know it might seem strange, but it's an office party. We don't have many guests, but we could always use some more people. It's not much, but you'd be welcome." She stared at him for a long time, unsure. Mark was starting to feel a little awkward. What if she thought he was crazy? What if she didn't want to come inside at all? But to his surprise, the woman stood up slowly, dusting off her clothes. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'll come in," she said quietly. Mark led her back inside the building, the door swinging open as they entered. As they walked through the lobby, the woman's presence seemed out of place among the well-dressed office workers. She had no fancy clothes, No expensive shoes, just the same old clothes she had been wearing outside. Mark tried to ignore the feeling of awkwardness as they walked through the hallways and into the party room. When they entered, a few people glanced up, surprised to see a stranger entering. Mark tried to act casual, offering her a drink. The woman took it hesitantly, still unsure of what to do. Most of the people at the party continued their conversations, but some were whispering and staring. Mark felt his nerves rise. What had he done? What would everyone think? He wanted the woman to feel welcome, but the looks from his coworkers made him second-guess his decision. Still, the woman smiled faintly. She seemed calm, even though Mark could tell she was uncomfortable. The party was getting quieter now, with people's attention starting to turn toward her. Mark didn't know how this night would end, but one thing was certain: he had made a choice. He had invited her in, and now, the night was about to take an unexpected turn. As the woman entered the party, the atmosphere shifted. The room, which had once felt relaxed and lively, suddenly felt tense. People's eyes shifted toward the woman as she walked in, her old clothes and worn shoes making her stand out like a sore thumb against the polished suits and dresses of the office employees. Mark tried to smile and act casual, but it was impossible to ignore the curious stares of his coworkers. The woman, whose name Mark hadn't even learned yet, seemed completely unaware of the awkwardness around her. She took the drink he offered with a quiet "thank you" and began to sip it slowly, looking around the room as if trying to decide where to sit. Mark could feel the weight of the situation. He had invited her with the hope of doing something kind, but now he wasn't sure if it was the right thing. Some of the employees whispered to each other, exchanging confused glances. One of the women, Sarah from accounting, leaned in toward another coworker and whispered loudly enough for Mark to hear. "Who invited her?" Mark winced. He could feel the heat rising in his cheeks. He had hoped people would just let the woman be, but it was clear that wasn't going to happen. His nerves began to get the best of him as he watched her slowly move from group to group, not quite fitting in anywhere. The woman didn't seem to mind the attention, though. She didn't act shy or out of place. Instead, she walked through the room with a quiet confidence, as if she belonged there, even if no one else thought so. She made small talk with a few people and laughed softly at jokes that weren't directed at her. The more she interacted, the more Mark realized just how strange it was that she could seem so at ease, despite everyone else's discomfort. He found himself watching her closely, wondering about her. Why did she seem so calm? Didn't she feel the heavy eyes of judgment on her? And who was she really? Was she just a random woman, or was there something more to her? Mark couldn't help but feel a little intrigued, though he tried to push the thought aside. After all, he had only invited her to be kind, not to unravel a mystery. Still, as the night went on, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the unanswered questions hanging in the air. The woman continued to mingle, and Mark began to wonder if maybe he had done something wrong. Why did she seem so different from the others? The more he thought about it, the more it felt like something was off. Then, as Mark went to check on the food table, he saw her talking to Mr. Turner, the CEO of the company. The sight of the two of them caught him by surprise. Mr. Turner, who was usually the center of attention at office events, seemed unusually interested in this woman. They were talking in hushed tones, their heads close together, and there was a look in Mr. Turner's eyes that Mark had never seen before, something that looked like respect. Mark's heart skipped a beat. What was going on? Why was Mr. Turner so focused on her? He had never seen the CEO speak to anyone that way, especially not someone who seemed so out of place at this fancy party. He tried to brush off the thought, but a strange feeling crept over him. He couldn't stop staring at them. The woman had a quiet, gentle smile on her face as she spoke, and Mr. Turner seemed completely engaged in the conversation. Mark was confused. He had never seen this woman before in his life, but why did it feel like she was more than just a random guest? And why was the CEO so interested in her? As the conversation continued, Mark felt his curiosity growing. Was this woman truly just some random stranger who had wandered into the party, or was there more to her story than he had thought? Something told him that this night was going to take a turn he never expected. The tension in the room seemed to rise, but Mark couldn't look away. Every moment, every word exchanged between the woman and Mr. Turner felt like another piece of the puzzle was falling into place. He had no idea what was about to unfold, but he knew one thing for sure. The woman's presence here was no accident. The night dragged on, and the office party began to settle into a quieter rhythm. Music played softly in the background, but most of the employees were gathered in small groups, chatting. Mark felt his discomfort grow with every passing minute. The woman, who was still standing near the food table, laughing and talking to some people, didn't seem to notice the way everyone was staring. In fact, she seemed almost unfazed by the whole situation. Her calmness was starting to feel strange to Mark. There was something different about her, something he couldn't explain. He kept watching her, trying to make sense of what was going on. Why did she seem so at ease? Why was Mr. Turner so focused on her? It didn't make sense. He had never seen anyone walk into the party with such confidence, especially not someone who looked so out of place. The more he watched her, the more questions he had. Then, just as he was about to leave the party room to check the supplies, he noticed something that caught his eye. It was a small thing, but it felt important. As the woman reached for another drink, a flash of light reflected off a small object hanging around her neck. It was a delicate necklace, almost too fancy for someone in her situation. Mark's curiosity took over. The necklace was simple, with a small, sparkling diamond hanging from it, and it seemed completely out of place on someone dressed in worn-out clothes. He tried to ignore it at first, thinking it was just a coincidence. Maybe she had received it as a gift, or maybe she had it before her life became difficult. But the more he thought about it, the more the necklace bothered him. It didn't make sense. Who would wear something so valuable if they were truly homeless? And why had no one else noticed it? Mark's mind raced as he tried to connect the dots. He glanced back at the woman. She was still standing there, chatting with some employees from marketing, laughing at their jokes. But that necklace, it seemed like a key piece of the puzzle. Why had she worn it tonight, of all nights? He needed to find out more. He couldn't stop himself from feeling like there was something he was missing. But before he could act on his thoughts, something even stranger happened. The woman caught his eye from across the room and gave him a soft smile. For a moment, their eyes locked, and Mark felt a shiver run down his spine. It was as if she knew exactly what he was thinking, as if she was aware that he was trying to figure her out. Mark quickly looked away, feeling embarrassed. Why was he acting so strange? He had invited her here to be kind. But now, his mind was racing with thoughts and questions. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. But what was it? Just then, Mr. Turner, the CEO, approached the woman. They exchanged a few words, and she smiled politely. But when he handed her a glass of wine, Mark saw something that made his heart skip a beat. The CEO had just said something that made her laugh, but it wasn't the kind of laugh you would expect from someone who didn't belong. There was an underlying familiarity in the way they spoke to each other, an unspoken connection that Mark couldn't understand. As Mr. Turner turned to leave, he looked over at Mark. "I'm glad you invited her," he said with a smile. "She's a great woman." His words felt strange, too warm for someone who was just an employee at a party. Mark's mind was spinning. What was going on? The CEO's words only made the mystery deeper. Who was this woman? Why was she so familiar with Mr. Turner? And why was he speaking about her like she was someone important? And that necklace. Mark couldn't shake the thought that it was a clue to something much bigger than a random party guest. His curiosity was getting the best of him. And now, Mark was more determined than ever to figure out the truth. The night had just begun to take a strange turn, and Mark knew that he was standing at the edge of something that would change everything he thought he knew. The hours at the party seemed to drag on, But Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The woman with the mysterious necklace, who seemed so out of place yet so calm, was still at the center of attention. As the night progressed, more and more people began to approach her, drawn in by her quiet confidence. She wasn't just blending into the background anymore. She had become the focal point of the evening, and everyone was eager to talk to her. Mark stood by the window, gazing outside, but not really seeing anything. His mind was racing. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman and her unusual calmness. What was her story? Why did she seem so familiar with the CEO, Mr. Turner? And why had she been sitting outside earlier, dressed in such old clothes, only to suddenly show up at the office party looking like she belonged there? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice behind him. "Mind if I join you?" It was the woman. She had approached him quietly, and now she stood beside him, looking out at the city lights in the distance. Mark was caught off guard but quickly recovered. "Of course, go ahead," he said, trying to act casual. The woman smiled faintly and looked at him, as if studying him. Mark felt uneasy under her gaze. He was suddenly aware of how little he knew about her, and yet he felt as though she knew everything about him. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt," she said gently, breaking the silence. "But you've been looking at me a lot tonight. I hope I'm not making you uncomfortable." Mark blinked, caught off guard by her directness. He quickly shook his head. "No, not at all. I was just wondering something." Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "What's on your mind?" Mark hesitated. He had so many questions, but he wasn't sure if it was his place to ask. I don't mean to be rude, but I noticed your necklace earlier. It seems special." "It's just that. You don't look like someone who would wear something like that, you know." He regretted the words as soon as they left his mouth, but the woman didn't seem offended. In fact, she smiled knowingly. "It's funny, isn't it?" she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "People often judge others by what they wear or what they see on the outside. They think they know the whole story just by looking." She paused, her expression turning thoughtful. "But that necklace, it's not just jewelry. It means something." Mark frowned, feeling his heart race. "What does it mean?" She glanced at him, her eyes piercing as if she were reading his soul. "It means everything. It's a reminder of who I really am." Before Mark could respond, she turned to face him fully, her expression changing as she spoke again. "I didn't expect to reveal this to anyone tonight, but I suppose it's time." Her voice was calm, almost too calm, as she continued. "The truth is, I'm not who you think I am." Mark's stomach twisted in confusion. He had been wondering about her all night, but he wasn't prepared for this. What was she talking about? Who was she really? Seeing the confusion on his face, the woman took a deep breath and decided to explain. "I'm not homeless, Mark. I haven't been for a long time. I came here tonight for a reason, but not because I needed help. I wanted to see something." She looked around the room, as if searching for someone, then returned her gaze to him. "I wanted to see how people would treat someone like me, someone who doesn't fit the mold of what you expect." Mark could barely believe his ears. "So, you're not—" he started, but she stopped him with a gentle shake of her head. "No," she said softly, her voice full of understanding. "I'm not who you thought I was, but it's okay. I've been playing a part tonight. The woman you saw outside, that wasn't me. That was part of the act." Mark was stunned. He had never expected this. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly starting to fit together, but they didn't make sense. Why would she pretend to be homeless? What was her true purpose for coming to the party? The woman seemed to sense his confusion and smiled gently. "I had to test something. I needed to know if people would treat me differently once they found out who I really was. And now I know." Before Mark could ask any more questions, Mr. Turner appeared beside them, having walked up quietly. He looked at the woman with a warm, knowing smile. "She's been the boss of this company for years now, Mark. Her name is Emma Turner. She's my wife. Mark's heart nearly stopped. The woman he had been so curious about was not only the CEO's wife, but also the head of the entire company. His eyes widened in shock as the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. All this time, he had been talking to someone far more important than he could have ever imagined. Emma smiled at him, her eyes filled with quiet amusement. I wanted to see if anyone would recognize me for who I really am, but it seems I was right all along. People judge too quickly based on what they see. But tonight, Mark, I hope you learned that appearances aren't always what they seem. Mark was speechless, his mind reeling. The woman he had thought was a random stranger, someone who didn't belong at the party, was actually the wife of the CEO and the head of the entire company. He had no idea how to process this sudden revelation. Emma gave him a small, knowing smile before turning back to her husband. I think it's time to go now, she said softly. Mark stood there in shock as they left the party, his head still spinning. Everything had changed in a single moment. He had thought he was helping a stranger, but in the end, it was him who had been taught an important lesson. Mark stood alone in the corner of the room, staring at the spot where Emma and Mr. Turner had just been. His mind was racing, trying to understand what had just happened. He couldn't believe it. The woman he had thought was a homeless stranger, the one he had invited out of kindness, was actually the wife of the CEO, and not just any CEO, but the leader of the entire company where he worked. He felt like the world had just shifted beneath him. All the moments he had shared with her, talking by the window, offering her a drink, suddenly seemed so different. He had been so wrong in his assumptions about her, and now he wasn't sure what to think. As the music played softly in the background and people continued to mingle around him, Mark's thoughts remained with Emma. He could still see her calm smile, the way she spoke with such confidence despite how everyone had stared at her when she first walked in. And Mr. Turner, his easy smile when he introduced her as his wife, suddenly made everything make sense. But what had she meant by testing people? Why had she gone to such lengths to act like she was homeless? Mark had learned that appearances were deceiving, but what was the point of the whole test? Was she trying to teach him a lesson? And if so, what was that lesson? As he pondered the questions, Sarah from accounting approached him, her face full of curiosity. Hey, Mark, are you okay? You've been looking a bit out of it tonight. Mark snapped out of his thoughts and forced a smile. Yeah, I'm fine. Just had a weird night, I guess. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Weird? You didn't hear. Everyone's talking about Emma Turner. They say she came here to teach us all a lesson. Mark's heart skipped. What kind of lesson? Sarah lowered her voice, glancing around. They say she wanted to see how people would treat someone who looked out of place. You know, like a homeless person. And she's been watching us the whole time. Mark stared at her, feeling the weight of the revelation hit him all over again. She was watching us the whole time. Yep, Sarah confirmed with a nod. Apparently, she wanted to see if we'd judge her or treat her differently. And you know what? Most of us did. Mark swallowed hard, realizing just how many mistakes he had made that night. He had judged her too. The minute he saw her standing outside, looking rough, he had made assumptions. He had offered her a drink and tried to be kind, but deep down, he had thought she didn't belong. He had been part of the crowd that had treated her differently, even if he hadn't meant to. Yeah, I guess we all learned something tonight, Sarah said quietly. Emma Turner isn't just the CEO's wife. She's been a part of this company for years, and the way we all reacted, it says a lot about us. Mark nodded, feeling the weight of the truth sink in. He had learned a lesson too. He had learned that he shouldn't judge anyone by what they looked like or where they came from. The world wasn't always as simple as it seemed, and sometimes the people who looked the least likely to belong were the ones who had the most to offer. As the party continued, Mark took a deep breath and looked around at his coworkers. They were all still talking, still laughing, but in his mind, everything had changed. He wasn't the same person he had been when the night began. He thought about Emma, about the way she had smiled when she told him she was testing everyone. She had probably known exactly how people would react. She had probably been waiting for this moment to show them all just how easy it was to make assumptions. Mark felt a sense of gratitude toward her. In a way, she had given him a gift. The gift of understanding. He would never look at people the same way again. As the party wound down, Mark found himself standing alone in the room, lost in thought. He didn't know where the night had gone, but he knew one thing for sure. He would never forget the lesson Emma Turner had taught him. A lesson about judging others, about seeing people for who they truly were, not just what they appeared to be. And from that moment on, Mark knew he would do better. He would treat everyone with respect, no matter what they looked like, no matter where they came from. Because sometimes, the most important lessons come from the most unexpected places. The days following the office party felt strange to Mark. He couldn't stop thinking about Emma Turner and the shocking truth about who she really was. The more he thought about it, the more he realized just how much he had taken for granted in his life. He had always prided himself on being fair, on not judging people too quickly. But after that night, Mark knew he had been wrong. The next morning, he walked into the office, his mind preoccupied. He tried to focus on his work, but it was hard. His thoughts kept drifting back to the party, the way everyone had treated Emma, the way he had treated her. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He had learned an important lesson, yes, but it was clear to him now that there were deeper consequences to what had happened that night. As he passed through the office, he saw the usual group gathered near the coffee machine, laughing and chatting. But something had changed. The mood was different now. The people who had been so quick to ignore or dismiss Emma were now looking at each other with uneasy glances. Mark could tell that they were all wondering the same thing. Had they made a mistake? Had they judged her too harshly? He walked past them without saying anything, not wanting to get caught up in their conversation. But deep down, he knew that the lesson Emma had tried to teach everyone was starting to sink in. People were beginning to realize just how much they had underestimated her, and they were beginning to feel guilty for it. Later that afternoon, Mark received an unexpected email. It was from Mr. Turner, the CEO. Mark felt his stomach drop as he read the subject line. A private meeting. He clicked on the email and opened it quickly. Dear Mark, the email began. I hope you're doing well. I'd like to invite you to a private meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. in my office. Please let me know if that time works for you. I have something important I'd like to discuss with you. Mark's heart started to race. What did Mr. Turner want to talk to him about? Could this have something to do with the party? Was he in trouble? He quickly replied, confirming the meeting time, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. What could this be about? He had done nothing wrong, had he? He had only invited Emma, a woman he thought was homeless, to the party out of kindness. But now, after everything that had happened, he wasn't so sure. The next morning, Mark made his way to Mr. Turner's office. His palms were sweaty, and his mind was a blur of questions. As he knocked on the door and entered, he was greeted by Mr. Turner's warm smile. Mark, good to see you, Mr. Turner said, motioning for him to sit down. I'm glad you could make it. Mark nodded, trying to hide his nerves. Of course, Mr. Turner. Is everything okay? Mr. Turner's smile faded slightly as he sat down across from him. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Last night's party, specifically the way you treated Emma. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure what to say, but he managed to stammer. I didn't mean anything by it. I didn't know who she was, and I just thought. Mr. Turner raised a hand, cutting him off gently. I know you didn't mean any harm, Mark. I know you're a good person, but Emma came to that party for a reason. She wanted to see if people would treat her differently because of the way she looked. And it's clear that you did. Mark's face turned red. He didn't know how to respond. He felt embarrassed, but also strangely ashamed. He hadn't meant to treat Emma differently, but he had. Mark, Mr. Turner continued, you're a smart guy. But you need to understand something important. The way you treat people, especially those who are less fortunate, says a lot about you. Emma isn't just my wife. She's also a partner in this company. She's been helping us make key decisions for years. She's as much a part of this company as anyone. Mark felt like he was being lectured, but the words were hitting home. He had been too quick to judge, and now he was being reminded that his actions had consequences. "I know," Mark whispered, feeling a pang of guilt in his chest. Mr. Turner softened his tone. "I'm not here to punish you, Mark, but I wanted you to understand that what happened last night wasn't just about Emma. It was about all of us. How we treat others matters, whether they're in a suit or on the street. We have to be careful not to judge someone just by their appearance or their situation." Mark nodded slowly, the weight of the lesson sinking in. He had learned it the hard way, but he understood now. He hadn't just failed Emma. He had failed himself by letting assumptions dictate his actions. "You'll be fine, Mark," Mr. Turner said with a reassuring smile. "Just remember this lesson, and the next time you meet someone, whether they're dressed in rags or a suit, treat them with the same respect you would want for yourself." Mark left the meeting feeling a mix of relief and regret. He had learned an important lesson, but it had come at a price. The consequences of his actions had forced him to see the world in a different way. And although he felt embarrassed about how he had acted, he was grateful for the chance to grow. Mark couldn't shake the conversation with Mr. Turner from his mind. It had been a wake-up call, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized just how much his perspective had changed. He had always considered himself a fair person, but now he understood how easy it was to make judgments based on assumptions. The days following the meeting were quiet at the office. Mark worked as usual, but something felt different. His interactions with his coworkers, his conversations, everything felt more thoughtful, more careful. He paid attention to the way people spoke to each other, the way they treated those who weren't as fortunate, and he noticed how much he had taken certain things for granted. The next time Mark saw Emma, it was at a company meeting. She walked in confidently, just as she had at the party. But this time, Mark didn't see her as the mysterious woman he had once wondered about. He saw her as someone who had been teaching him a lesson all along, someone who had shown him that appearances didn't tell the full story. When Emma passed by his desk, she gave him a small, knowing smile. Mark smiled back, a sincere one this time. He had changed. He had learned. As the weeks went on, Mark found himself becoming more aware of how he treated others. He no longer looked at people and judged them based on how they looked or where they came from. He learned to see beyond the surface. He learned that everyone had a story, and it wasn't always the one you could guess just by looking at them. Mark also noticed a change in how others treated him. People seemed to respect him more, to trust him more. He wasn't sure if it was because of the lesson he had learned, or because they had noticed his own shift in attitude. Either way, Mark felt more connected to the people around him. One afternoon, as Mark was leaving the office, he bumped into Emma again. This time, it was just the two of them in the hallway. She smiled at him, but there was something different in her eyes. It wasn't just the calm confidence she always had. There was a kind of understanding, as if she knew exactly what he had learned. "You've changed," she said softly. Mark nodded. "I have. And it's all thanks to you." Emma smiled. "It wasn't just me. You had to be open to the lesson. But I'm glad you understood." Mark felt a sense of gratitude toward her. He realized now that her actions had been deliberate. She had wanted to teach everyone a lesson, not just about judging people based on appearances, but about treating people with kindness, regardless of who they were. And she had done it without saying a word, simply by being herself. "I won't forget what you taught me," Mark said earnestly. Emma gave him a small smile. "Good. And remember, Mark, we all have a part to play. The way we treat others can change everything. Don't ever forget that." As Mark watched Emma walk away, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of appreciation for her. She had come into his life at the right moment, at a time when he needed to learn something important. And even though it had been a difficult lesson to learn, Mark knew it was one that would stay with him forever. From that day on, Mark made a conscious effort to treat everyone he met with respect and kindness. He didn't know where life would take him, but he was determined to live in a way that honored the lesson Emma had taught him. He had learned to never judge someone based on what they appeared to be, but rather to see them for who they truly were, and that, he realized, made all the difference.